These are devotions for people at a social distance for about a year now. Churches throughout the world, churches throughout North America, have been struggling with a difficult question. How do we be a church without a building? And obviously, we've learned a lot about that, and we've been very creative about how to find ways to connect and to be a church apart from the building. Even if, there's been times when we've been able to go back in for a bit, it continues to be a struggle. This morning in my personal devotions, I was reading in 1 Peter chapter 2, 4-6. Now, 1 Peter is a letter that is addressed explicitly in the first chapter to churches in a particular region of what we would call Asia Minor today. So these were churches, in the early life of Christianity that were living in minority positions, and they were living in places and societies that had long time institutional capital built up. In other words, various religions, and of course there were many gods and many different religions in those areas, had built up a religious infrastructure. Temples, houses for priests, all kinds of ceremonial buildings that they could use to bolster their life. And I'm sure that the Christians who were addressed by this letter were looking around and saying, oh, look at all of these other religions. They've got all of this wonderful infrastructure. How can we compete? And who are we to try and think that we have anything special when we don't have all of these wonderful buildings? And I think it's in that context we need to understand the second chapter, starting at verse 4. Come to him, Jesus, a living stone, though rejected by mortals, yet chosen and precious in God's sight. And like living stones, let yourselves be built into a spiritual house, to be a holy priesthood, to offer spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. Now, what is the apostle saying here? He is saying to the church, he's not making a promise, we're going to have that religious infrastructure. We're going to have those buildings. Hang on, we're going to get those buildings. It's going to be great. No, he says, you are the buildings. You are being built into the structure. You are the priesthood. Yes, we don't have temples to make traditional sacrifices, but you will carry out spiritual sacrifices. The church is not about building up that infrastructure. It is about building up the people, and it's only when we do that we are the church. And of course, despite what it says there in 1 Peter chapter 2, the church then went on to spend much of the next several millennia concentrating on building churches by building buildings. And, that has been our obsession, especially in denominations like the Presbyterians. Some others have gotten away from that. But, for us, the focus has always been, well, to be a church, you have to have a building. And when you have a building, there are all kinds of obligations and things you need to take care of. And for the last year, we've been learning just how wrong-headed that kind of thinking is. If we are building buildings and not building up people, we are not the church. And I am thankful for an opportunity to learn to focus in the life of the church on building up people, and how well we've succeeded in doing that, and how much we have failed. We need to think about that and look at that. But God has sent us a time to teach us something important about what it is to be the church. Lord our God, moving forward, even as in hopefully months to come, we will be able to reuse our buildings in new ways. Let us not forget the lessons of the last year. Amen.